Hello, welcome to Conversations and Music with Michael Feinstein. That happens to be me, so what a felicitous combination. This is my studio. This is my transfer studio, my recording studio. In this little room, I have recorded a number of things. I did an album with Jimmy Webb. I've worked with a number of different songwriters in this room, creating demos. And when I had a BBC radio series for a while, I interviewed Marilyn and Alan Bergman about their career and many other luminaries who have come through this little space. But over the last several years, it has become overrun with all kinds of recorded media that I try to save and transfer as I have time. And it is a lifelong race against the clock to save media, because as technology has changed through the many decades, things become obsolete, and sometimes finding the equipment to be able to play or transfer something is very difficult to accomplish, especially in the digital age, because digital technology has changed so quickly that, for example, my first album with an orchestra, Isn't It Romantic, was recorded 1988, 87, and it was recorded on a Sony digital 24-track machine that became obsolete perhaps 2 years later. And so if I wanted to go back and access those 24-track masters and transfer them again with new technology, I'd have to find somebody who had a machine in order to be able to do that, and somebody who knows how to operate that machine and understands the subtleties of using that particular piece of equipment in order to make it function. So there are all these issues that happen with recorded sound, and I've had an obsession with recorded sound since I was 4 or 5 years old, when I first found old 78 RPM records. Now we live in a time where a lot of people don't even know what records are. And yet this whole history is something that is part of my daily life. I'm going to be doing a podcast soon in which I'll be playing a lot of recordings that I have discovered, because like many collectors or archivists, I have a number of items that are unique to my collection. Many of these things are going to become part of the Great American Songbook Foundation collection, and a lot of those things are already there, along with orchestrations and manuscripts and other ephemera. And often when one obtains a collection, it can consist of many different types of things. It can be different types of recordings and audio tapes. It can be scripts. It can be sheet music, orchestral music. It's an endless pursuit. And yet it's always a feeling of being able to save or preserve something that keeps me going. I am not by nature a pack rat, in the sense that I'm a Virgo and I want everything to be in order. But there's so much stuff that I know that I will never be able to hear or access everything that I've collected before I die. So the best thing that I can do is try and get it in some semblance of order, so it will be useful to people in the future, and that they'll be able to catalog it and to hopefully one day digitize all of it so it can live on. And these things deserve to live on. Even the most obscure object that might have been taken for granted by somebody many years ago can have significance. I'll show you some of the things that are just sitting here in the studio. None of this is staged or prepared. This is just what it is. Records. Disc records came into existence in 1877, invented by a man named Emil Berliner. Thomas Edison created a technology to reproduce recorded sound, but it was on a cylinder machine, and it was Emil Berliner who invented the disc record that is, or was, the common means of reproducing recorded sound for literally 100 years. So discs started out as a non-commercial thing, and then they found a way to start creating mass pressings of music and songs. Now, in the early days, the preferred means of reproducing recorded sound were piano rolls. Paper rolls that had holes punched in them that were put on a pneumatic mechanism on a piano that would cause the keys to depress, and it would play, the piano would play. And people preferred that to recorded sound back in the early days because it was a live instrument actually playing music. Early records sound so primitive, the fidelity was so poor that many famous musicians of the day decried recorded sound because they said it was a prostitution of their work. Most famously, John Philip Sousa, who was the American March King and one of the most famous musicians in the United States in his time, harshly criticized recorded sound, saying that it was so primitive. Later, Sousa capitulated and became a best-selling recording artist as technology improved. So there are all different kinds of recordings that have been created over this 100-plus year period. Some of them are individually grooved records, non-commercial things like this. This is a lacquer disc, which I listened to once and wrote down what the content was. But these are non-commercial things that preserve all sorts of amazing objects. There are recordings of Broadway composers and performers in moments in time that would otherwise be lost that are preserved on records like these acetates, which are instantaneous discs that are one-offs. The counterpart to these are commercially pressed discs. These discs were made in multiple numbers. This is a Bing Crosby recording, and this was this disc played for about 2.5 minutes or so, actually 2 minutes and 50 seconds. And so these were the ways that popular songs were disseminated back in the golden age of American popular music. And a system was invented. I don't know if Emil Berliner invented it or who came up with the technology, but they found a way to create a master stamper from which they could press multiple copies of a record. So then if a record became popular, they could stamp 500, 1,000, or even millions of them until the stampers wore out. So this is a mass-produced record of which there are many, many copies. And so these records are, generally speaking, less valuable than an acetate or an individually grooved record that was only made for one person for personal use. However, even a record like this, sometimes the original master material from which this record was made can disappear. One assumes, if they look at a record like this, that it will live forever, that it's around and it's not going anywhere. But this is a record on the Decca label. The successor to the rights of Decca Records is Universal Music, and there was a fire at the Universal Studios where there were warehouses that had all these master recordings and tapes of much of the Decca Records library, and a lot of it was permanently lost. And therefore, these pressed records become more important because the originals are gone. And so it gets into so many different issues when it comes to preservation of recorded sound. But let me play you a few things instead of just talking about all these so you can get a sense of the different types of sounds and such. Because records from different eras have very different sound to them. Let's see if I can find some Broadway-related things. Very hard to read this label here. This is Nick Lucas, who introduced Tiptoe Through the Tulips. And on this side, it's Hello Bluebird, which Judy Garland later sang in a movie called I Could Go On Singing. Well, just to give you an idea of what a record from this vintage sounds like, let's put it on. Okay. All right. So the first thing I have to do is determine the speed of this record. It's 78 RPM, but sometimes the speeds of these records vary This is an electric record because it says electric record, which means it was recorded post 1925 with a microphone. And it's probably from the late 20s. So this is called Hello Bluebird. Now I have to set it to the right speed. And if I weren't taking shortcuts, I would use a strobe disc to make sure that the speed is absolutely accurate, but I'm not going to do that right now. Then I have to figure out what kind of needle is best for the record. And let's give it a spin, see what it sounds like. He's playing the guitar, Nick Lucas, who's also singing. Not the right sound, is it? So let's try another needle, see if it'll make it sound any better. Let's try the 2.0. I like to go back to a smaller needle. Depends on the wear of the record and how it was stored as to how it will sound. Sounds louder, a little clearer. Again, if I was going to take time, I would go through the different size styli until I find the one that makes it sound the best. Sounds better. So the first thing one does in preservation is you transfer the sound flat. In other words, you don't add any equalization or effects to it, because you can do all of that later. So I would transfer the recording flat to some digital hard drive or such, and then I can manipulate the sound, and I can play with the different channels, the left and the right channel. I can add things that will clean it up and get rid of all of the frequency bandwidth that is playing that has no music recorded, because in these times the fidelity is like here, like maybe up to 5,000 cycles per second, and yet the system is reproducing sounds that we don't need to hear. So when you get rid of that extraneous stuff, it gets rid of a lot of the noise. And then there are computer programs that can take out clicks and pops and make it overall sound better. One of the fun things of collecting material like this is to find something unusual that may relate to a song that is very well known, or a songwriter that we know, to find that it's a bit of lost history. One of the things that is fun to collect are recordings of industrial shows, and there was that wonderful documentary on HBO about industrial musicals, but that dealt with original musicals written for commercial purposes. But this is something I found recently that is a presentation, 1963 presentation of Mattel's Guys and Dolls, or How to Succeed in the Toy Business by Really Trying. And this has parodies of a lot of very popular Broadway songs with a lyric sheet included, Guys and Dolls Toy Show, song number 1, in which someone wrote parody lyrics for which they had to get permission from the songwriters. We got the toys right here to set a record year. I got a real hot tip from the engineer. Can do, can do. This guy says the toys can do. If he says the toys can do, can do, can do. So we've got that. And in celebration of Stephen Sondheim's 90th birthday, I think I should play you the final cut on this record. So we have to switch it to 33 and a third RPM. We've got to get the LP stylus. There we go. So let's see what this sounds like.
We have a dream of a doll, fellas.
A dream of a doll, fellas.
She's already a star, but fellas, Barbie's swell, Barbie's great, Barbie's every girl's first fashion plate. Starting here, starting now, fellas, everything's coming up. Barbie,
Had fun?
she's a doll, she's the queen, she's the best looking doll on the scene.
Best selling.
With her Ken by her side,
At her side.
fellas, everything's coming up. Barbie,
We should put this in the show, don't you think?
now's your inning. Stand your store on its ear. Sails were spinning. That was all just the beginning. Turn up.
Well, you get the idea. I mean, to find something like this is sheer joy. All right, so let me play another one that is also fun. I came across a campaign record a few years ago that was created to help the campaign of Adlai Stevenson, who did not win the presidential election. And a lot of heavy hitters were supporting his campaign, but in spite of that, it didn't happen. So this is a promotional record that was produced by Mitch Miller, who was head of the A&R at Columbia Records, Artists and Repertoire. And turn it over, and it has contributions from Dick Adler, co-writer of Pajama Game, Damn Yankees, Mary Rogers Beatty, the daughter, of course, of Richard Rogers, who wrote Once Upon a Mattress. Lerner and Lowe, Adlai's Gonna Win This Time. Writers, Brigadoon, Paint Your Wagon, My Fair Lady. And Johnny Green, who wrote Body and Soul and I Cover the Waterfront. So let's play a little bit of this. Let's listen to Adlai's Gonna Win This Time. The tune may be familiar to you. Let's see if we can... Oh, there's no... Okay, wait a minute. What do we have to do? Have to get the 45 RPM adapter. Some of you have probably never seen a 45 RPM record. Well, these replaced the 78s that I showed you earlier. These came into being in the late 1940s, and it was developed by RCA Victor as a means of fighting Columbia Records, who had come up with a different format record. So, let's see if we can find Adlai's Gonna Win This Time.
Bells are gonna chime. We'll start campaigning in the morning. Ding dong, the bells are gonna chime. Pull out the stopper, let's have a whopper, for Adlai's gonna win this time.
That's what you think.
He's getting started in the morning. Spruce up the feeling in the pride. Stand up and shout it, no doubt about it. And Adlai's gonna win this time. He's gonna lead us to victory. He's gonna move to Washington.
Gonna move to Washington, D.C. Yeah. Stop him.
Adlai's gonna win. Adlai's gonna win. Adlai Stevenson
There we have it. Adlai's Gonna Win This Time. He lost both times. This was from the 1956 presidential election. In the 1952 presidential election, Ira Gershwin wrote a parody of Love is Sweeping the Country, of Adlai Sweeping the Country, and also one to It Ain't Necessarily So. It ain't necessarily so. They say Ike's arranging for things to be changing, but it ain't necessarily so. But that didn't help either. So, the other thing that's fun with records is to find remnants of lost Broadway musicals. When I say lost Broadway musicals, shows that were not commercially recorded, that there were no cover records of songs from the show. They just sort of vanished. And this is an example of that. I have never played any of these records, but these are demos of a show that played on Broadway very briefly called The Genius Farm. Music and lyrics by Norman Retchen. Music by Hal Bourne. Hal Bourne was Fred Astaire's rehearsal pianist and later became a distinguished songwriter and musical director for many years. And these recordings were given to me by his widow, Rose, and they will become part of our Great American Songbook Foundation collection. And this is a demo of the score of The Genius Farm, and I have not been able to find any music, any scores, any orchestrations, not a scrap of it. So this may be the only document of this show. Let's just listen to a little bit of the first cut just to see what it sounds like. Go back to the speed of 33. Okay. And this record needs a good cleaning. So let's go to the second track just because it looks...
Where I come from, when a boy loves a girl, he doesn't leave her, not ever. Where I come from, when a girl loves a boy, she's with him always, forever. And when the boy goes to follow his dream, they don't say au revoir, not so long.
It's a nice song.
The girl that he loves is part of his dream, and together is where they belong.
So if anybody out there knows anything about the Genius Farm or has music or any other pieces of ephemera relating to it, it'd be fun to know. We can combine our resources. We could join, yeah. Okay. Oh, there's something interesting to play for you. One of the most important, groundbreaking musical shows was Showboat, produced on Broadway in 1927, music by Jerome Kern, lyrics by Oscar Hammerstein II. One of the original cast members of the 1927 show was Helen Morgan. In 1935, Helen Morgan reprised her role of Julie in the Universal motion picture. And this is a rare recording of a recording session of Helen singing one of her signature songs, Can't Help Lovin' That Man. So this is a unique, individually grooved disc. This is probably the only existing document of this thing. So it's got various takes of Helen singing Can't Help Lovin' That Man until they find the one that they like. For this cue, 1063, she did 4 takes. They circled take 3, so that was the one that they selected of the 4 that she sang. It was recorded August 10th, 1935. And on the other side, what have we got here? It's another rendition of it. And they've circled take 3, take 5, and take 6. Take 4 looks like it's a breakdown. So let's just listen to a little bit of take 4, see what happened, why they stopped. All right. At the right speed there. Okay. This is a record, I believe, that plays outside in as opposed to inside out. Yeah. we're waiting. Come on, he says, come on. Kill it, okay. So that was take 4. Not very exciting, was it? Let's try this one. Another take. That's it. Sometimes the most fun is listening to the conversation before and after the take. You'll hear people say all sorts of interesting things. Like I have Judy Garland, one of these discs where she starts to do a take and they stop and she says, "You confused me." So it's those little bits of dialogue and moments of real life that come out listening to these records. Well, I'm going to play you a song to tie this all up. It's a funny thing, I look at you, I get a thrill, I never knew. Isn't it a pity we never met before? We are at last, it's like a dream, the two of us, a perfect team. Isn't it a pity we never met before? Imagine all the lonely we wasted. You with neighbors, I had silly labors. What joys untasted. You reading Heine, I somewhere in China. Happiest of men, I'm sure to be, if only you will say to me, it's an